Hello and welcome. I am live from Pelham's Wasteland, and today I have another episode of Pelham's Wasteland Reads for you all, this time covering John Dormison's The Glory of the Empire. The cover that I've got here is from the NYRB Classics edition of it, translated by Barbara Bray, and has an introduction from Daniel Mendelsohn. So, The Glory of the Empire is this very strange piece of fiction that is written with, I guess I would say, the aesthetic codes and formulations of nonfiction. It is a history of events that never happened, a history of the empire, which does not and never did exist, but in this vision of history perhaps could have. Central to this story is the struggle between Onessa and the city, and there these two cities, these two places that have a long running struggle between them, between the eagle and the tiger. There is a sort of mythological background for their struggle that also transforms into a historical background based on the history of the struggle between the two of them. There's even, and this is kind of where the glory of the empire becomes so fascinating, is that there's all of this material that one might expect from the kind of secondary and tertiary historical material that becomes a part of the history, as it sort of accretes in art and in literature and in all of these other formulations about history. And so much of the glory of the empire is about all of that. So, for example, in this discussion of the city and Onessa, in introducing these two places, Jean Dormison describes how you can go to the place where Onessa was and walk through the ruins and see the ruins of this once very powerful city, this center of a civilization at one time that has now fallen into ruin, and all that remains are, necropoli and fallen down structures and the foundations of this kind of golden age, but that presents this as if this is an experience that a person in the real world could have, when obviously there is no Onessa, there is no the city, there is no Amphibolus, there aren't any of these places, although there are real places that are in this story. The city of Rome, and the Pope ends up becoming a very important part of this story. And there are all these other kind of details of real world places. The King of Sicily plays a role in a number of parts. There's all of these different kind of things. There's a whole sequence in Alexandria in Egypt. There's all of these different parts of Central Asia where our sort of protagonist Alexis ends up spending a good chunk of his youth and up until kind of his middle age away from the empire itself. There's all of these different kind of fascinating blendings of the real and the non-real, these fictional places and events and characters that come to have a life in real places and events and characters. So, like, there's a discussion of, in real history, a woman named Anna Karenina, who was the daughter of Alexius Comnenus, who was the Byzantine emperor at the time of the First Crusade, wrote a biography of her father called the Alexiad. The Alexiad, in The Glory of the Empire, we are told, is actually a piece of literature that is a history of the Emperor Alexis, who is a character in this story, who is an invented figure that blends all these different kind of ideas about kingship and rulership of the empire and all of that into one kind of single central character. But then there's all these other versions of this. There's a passage that is a quotation, or purports to be a quotation from Marcel Proust's In Search of Lost Time, this grand 7-volume series. And it purports to be a sequence from one of these books that describes a character seeing an event from The Glory of the Empire in painting, seeing this painting that is a classical representation of this event that, of course, in real life never actually happened. But this painting that is in a real place and that is seen by a real character, and that this is recorded, this fictional event being recorded in the fiction of Marcel Proust. It's this layering and layering of fiction and nonfiction into this really clever and playful, and ultimately, I think, very fun to engage with version of history. Essentially, this kind of grand experiment, maybe a grand prank in historiography, this engagement with the idea of what things are history and what are not, how all of these, like I said, the kind of historical accretions accumulate around these figures, and what the world might be like if they accumulated around a couple of figures who are not real people. And there's this really, it's a really interesting kind of philosophical turn, I guess you might say, a sort of engagement with all these concepts of historiography in a fictional way. And also is a fun and interesting story about history, and that has all of these exciting events, full of all of the kind of things that narrative history is best at. These, major turning points of battles, and larger than life characters who have all of these strong opinions back and forth, and have all of these different, I guess you might say, roles to play in the ultimate sort of turning of the historical engine, which is part of why it is so much fun to read, in addition to all of this clever and interesting and sort of imaginative versions of historical events that have never happened, basically. So, yeah, The Glory of the Empire. I don't know necessarily what what else there is to say about it. It is this, like I said, this really interesting blend of different things. It is fiction presented as history, that is connected to all of the other histories. It's connected to Gibbon. There's a sequence where one of the characters in this story dies in battle and is buried at the he's buried underneath a river in Korea. They dam up the river so that the riverbed will be clear, so that they can dig his grave underneath it, and then destroy the dam so that the river will go back to its original flow, thereby covering over the grave and prevent it from being robbed, right? And we are told that this is a place where the Korean War really, there's a major battle from the late 40s, early 50s, the Korean War that happened at this place, American Marines against Chinese forces here in this place at this riverbed that does not exist, right? It's not a real, this is not a real place. And so much of the story is just like this. It's all of the kind of what ifs of what if history was like this, I guess you might say, which is fascinating and great fun to read, I guess, is the ultimate takeaway. Totally worth checking out for anyone who is interested in history and literature and the intersection between them, and has room for something that is kind of playful and weird like this, I guess. But that is going to be it for me for today. Let me know down in the comments if you've read The Glory of the Empire, or anything else that you think I ought to read that is related, or want to talk about anything else. Leave a comment down below. Otherwise, I've been live from Pelham's Wasteland, and I will see you next time. Take care, everybody.